My name is Victor, and I'm just an ordinary guy living what I thought was an extraordinary life. At least, that's how I saw it for the last decade. I grew up in a small town where dreams often seemed larger than life. I was never the kind of person who dreamed of big cities or lavish lifestyles. Instead, I yearned for something more simple, something real, a deep connection with someone I could share my life with. That's when I met Susan. Susan was a breath of fresh air. She walked into my life like a sudden gust of wind, and everything around me transformed. The moment I first laid eyes on her at that summer art exhibit, I was captivated by her vibrant spirit and infectious laughter. She was standing in front of a painting, her fingers lightly tracing the edges of the frame as she whispered her thoughts to a friend. I remember thinking how beautiful she looked, with her wavy chestnut hair cascading down her shoulders and her bright blue eyes sparkling with passion. At that moment, I knew I had to know her. Our connection was instantaneous and the chemistry between us was electric. As we talked about our favorite artists and shared our hopes and dreams, I felt an undeniable bond forming. It was as if we had known each other for a lifetime. After that night, we became inseparable, exploring the world together, and creating memories that would last forever. I can still remember our first date, a cozy little Italian restaurant tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. The aroma of garlic and fresh basil filled the air as we laughed and shared stories over a plate of pasta. Each glance she threw my way made my heart race, and by the end of the evening, I was completely smitten. Those early days were filled with adventure, laughter, and a sense of discovery. We would take long walks in the park, hand in hand, planning our future as we gazed at the stars. We married a few years later in a ceremony that felt like a fairy tale. Friends and family gathered to celebrate our love, and as I looked into Susan's eyes, I knew I was the luckiest man alive. We moved into a charming little house filled with sunlight, where we painted the walls with warm colors and filled the rooms with laughter and love. We shared dreams of starting a family, of cozy winter evenings by the fireplace, and of traveling the world together. Life together was a series of beautiful moments, dancing in the kitchen while dinner simmered on the stove, spontaneous weekend getaways, and quiet evenings wrapped up in each other's arms. We had our ups and downs, like any couple, but we faced each challenge with a united front. Susan was not just my wife, she was my partner, my confidant, and my best friend. As the years passed, we built a life filled with joy. We often hosted friends for dinner parties, creating an atmosphere of warmth and camaraderie. Our home became a sanctuary, a place where everyone felt welcome. Susan had a gift for making people feel special. Her laughter echoed through the halls, and her kindness radiated from her like a warm glow. I took pride in being her husband and often boasted about how lucky I was to have her by my side. But beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect life, something dark began to stir, a shadow lurking in the corners of my mind, whispering doubts that I had never entertained before. Little did I know that the idyllic picture we had painted together was about to crack and shatter, exposing a reality I never could have imagined. The first hint of trouble came when Susan started spending more time at the clinic. At first, I brushed it off as her commitment to her work. She was passionate about helping people, and I admired her for that. But as the weeks turned into months, I noticed subtle changes in her demeanor. The late nights at work, the secretive phone calls, the way she would smile just a little too brightly when I asked her about her day. A gnawing sense of unease began to creep into my heart, a feeling I couldn't shake off no matter how hard I tried. In those early days of suspicion, I often found myself reflecting on our life together, on the love we had built, and on the memories that felt so tangible yet so fragile. I wanted to believe in the strength of our bond, to cling to the hope that what we had was unbreakable. But with every passing day, that hope began to dim, overshadowed by the looming possibility of betrayal. As I look back now, I realize how naive I was to think our love was impervious to the complexities of life. The man I thought I knew, the life I thought we shared, would soon be challenged in ways I couldn't foresee. The darkness would rise to the surface, and I would be left to grapple with the painful truth of what it meant to be betrayed by the person I loved most. It was during one of those long, humid summer nights that I first began to notice the cracks in the seemingly perfect facade of my marriage. The light filtering through the curtains cast a warm glow across the room, but in my heart, I felt a chill creeping in. Susan had been acting differently lately, subtly, almost imperceptibly at first. Little things that, when added together, began to paint a troubling picture. I remember the first time it struck me. I had just returned home from a long day at work, tired and eager to share my day with her. The house was unusually quiet. Usually, I would hear her bustling around in the kitchen or listening to music while she tidied up. I found her sprawled on the couch, her phone clutched tightly in her hand, her expression distant and unapproachable. When she noticed me, her smile seemed forced, and she quickly turned her gaze back to the screen. It was a fleeting moment, but something about it unsettled me. As the days turned into weeks, those fleeting moments multiplied. Susan began returning home later than usual, and when I asked her about it, she would offer vague explanations: meetings at work, late-night consultations with colleagues, or just needing extra time to finish up on patient cases. I wanted to trust her, to believe that her dedication to her profession was the reason for her extended hours, but deep down, a nagging doubt began to take root in my mind. I found myself becoming increasingly aware of her phone. It seemed to be an extension of her being. It was always nearby, always within reach. She would glance at it constantly, her expression shifting from amusement to seriousness in a matter of seconds. I couldn't help but notice how she would smile softly at messages she received, often followed by an unsettling silence that hung heavily in the air. When I asked her who she was texting, she would dismiss the question with a casual wave of her hand, assuring me it was just a friend or a work-related message. But her tone felt evasive, as if she was holding something back. Something important. Our once open conversations turned into scripted exchanges. I longed for the deep, meaningful discussions we used to have, but those moments became few and far between. It was as if she was putting up walls, and I, helplessly on the other side, could only watch as the connection we had built began to erode. Then, there were the little things. The slight changes in her routine, the way she dressed when she left the house, the subtle scent of perfume that was not hers lingering in the air. I recalled a few instances when she had come home with a different makeup look, or when she had worn a dress I had never seen before. Each of those moments ignited a flicker of fear within me, yet I tried to dismiss them as mere coincidences. I wanted so desperately to believe in our love, to believe that we were still the same couple who had shared laughter and dreams. One fateful night, I sat in our living room, the television flickering in the background as I tried to focus on a book. But my mind kept drifting to thoughts of Susan and her increasingly secretive behavior. I glanced at the clock, 11 p.m., and felt a surge of anxiety rise in my chest. She should have been home by now. I picked up my phone, my finger hovering over the contact labeled Susan, but I hesitated. I didn't want to disturb her if she was busy, but the knot in my stomach tightened with each passing minute. When she finally walked through the door, the relief I felt was quickly overshadowed by the sight of her. Her eyes were wide, almost frantic, as if she was afraid I would ask her where she had been. Instead, I feigned a casual smile, attempting to mask my growing concern. "Long day at the clinic?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Yeah, you know how it is," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She quickly made her way to the bathroom, shutting the door behind her. I listened to the sound of running water, feeling an ache in my heart. That night, I decided to confront the shadows in my mind. I couldn't ignore the feeling any longer. I needed to know what was going on. I took a deep breath and resolved to search for clues that might explain Susan's strange behavior. The next day, when she left for work, I felt a mix of guilt and determination. As I walked through the house, my eyes fell on her phone, lying carelessly on the kitchen counter. My heart raced as I picked it up, glancing around to make sure I was alone. I hesitated, but the temptation proved too great. I unlocked it with the code I had memorized, my pulse pounding in my ears. The screen lit up with notifications and messages from various contacts. Most were benign, work-related, messages from friends, but one thread caught my eye. It was a conversation with her doctor, the very man who had been treating us for years, someone I had trusted implicitly. As I scrolled through their exchange, my heart sank. They discussed medical cases, sure, but beneath that facade, some comments felt personal, flirtatious, even. Words of encouragement turned into something more intimate, something that felt dangerously close to affection. They exchanged jokes and playful banter, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I read their words. "Can't wait to see you again," one message read, followed by a winking emoji. The floor beneath me felt like it was crumbling away. A sickening realization gripped me. My wife, the woman I had loved and trusted, was sharing something with another man that I thought was ours alone. My breath quickened and the air grew heavy with betrayal. I felt as though I was being pulled into an abyss, as if the world around me was spinning out of control. In that moment, everything changed. I could feel my family, my life with Susan, shattering around me like glass. The home we had built together, the laughter, the dreams, the love, now felt like a distant memory, replaced by the stark, cold reality of her infidelity. I knew I had to confront her, but a part of me feared what that confrontation would bring. As I sat there, phone trembling in my hand, I realized that this was no longer about simple misunderstandings or late nights at the clinic. This was the beginning of a battle for the heart of my marriage, and the stakes had never felt higher. I had to prepare for the inevitable fallout, and deep down, I understood that everything I thought I knew about love and trust was about to be turned upside down. The days that followed my discovery felt like a heavy fog settling over my life. I went through the motions of daily existence, work, chores, small talk with Susan, while inside, I was unraveling. Each time she smiled or laughed, I felt a pang of guilt and anger twist in my chest. My world, once vibrant and full of love, had morphed into a battleground of emotions, and I found myself caught in the crossfire. In search of clarity, I reached out to a couple of my closest friends. I needed to know if my suspicions had any basis in reality. Friends who had known us both for years, who had seen the love between Susan and me, were now my only lifeline in this storm of doubt. I felt a mixture of desperation and dread as I picked up the phone and dialed Greg's number. "Hey, Greg, got a minute?" I forced a casual tone, but my heart raced. "Of course, Vic. What's up?" He sounded cheerful, unaware of the turmoil brewing beneath my words. I hesitated, gathering my thoughts. "I just wanted to ask, have you seen Susan lately? Or heard anything about her?" There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear Greg's mind working through my question. Not really. Why do you ask?" I swallowed hard, weighing my next words. "I've noticed she's been working late more often, and I don't know, I'm a bit worried about her. You know how she can get when she's stressed." Greg chuckled lightly. "Yeah, she can be a bit of a workaholic. But I wouldn't worry too much, man. You know how dedicated she is. It's probably just the busy season." I nodded, though I knew deep down that it was more than that. "Yeah, I get it. I just wanted to check in, I guess. Listen, if you ever want to hang out or talk about it, I'm here for you, okay?" Greg's voice softened, and I felt a slight lift in my spirits. "Thanks, man. I appreciate it." After hanging up, I felt restless. I needed more than vague reassurances. I decided to call another friend, Lisa, who had always been a confidant. She had a knack for knowing when something was off, and I hoped she might shed some light on my situation. "Lisa, it's me, Victor," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Victor, hi, what's going on?" she replied, her cheerful tone making me feel both comforted and anxious. "I was wondering if you've seen Susan around lately?" "Oh, you know how it is. Busy with work and all," Lisa replied, sounding casual. "But actually, I did see her the other night." My heart skipped a beat. "Where?" At that Italian restaurant downtown. I was out with some colleagues, and she was there too. I think she was having dinner with someone." A heavy silence filled the air between us. I could feel the weight of her words pressing down on my chest. "Did you happen to see who she was with?" I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. Honestly, I didn't get a good look. But I remember thinking it was odd because she seemed engrossed in conversation with this guy. "I don't know, I thought it was just a work thing or something." "Thanks, Lisa. That helps." As I hung up the phone, I felt the world around me shift. My suspicions were no longer just whispers in the dark. They had taken shape, becoming a tangible truth that was hard to bear. I replayed the conversation with Greg and Lisa over and over, and with each repetition, the weight of confirmation settled heavily on my shoulders. I felt a surge of anger, a whirlwind of emotions that threatened to pull me under. How could Susan do this to us? To our life together? I had trusted her implicitly, and now that trust felt like shattered glass, sharp and unforgiving. I couldn't help but feel betrayed. Lost in the realization that the woman I had loved so deeply was hiding something so monumental from me. But as I wrestled with these emotions, another part of me knew that I needed to approach this situation carefully. I didn't want to create a scene, to blow up in anger, and risk losing everything I had worked so hard to build. I realized that I had to confront her, but it had to be on my terms, under the right circumstances, when everyone was watching, when she couldn't escape the truth. With each passing day, my internal conflict grew stronger. I envisioned the scene in my mind, Susan standing before me, her eyes wide with surprise and guilt as I revealed the truth I had uncovered. The doctor's name hung in the air like a ghost, an uninvited specter that loomed over our marriage. I imagined how her face would pale as the reality of her betrayal dawned on her. Anger swirled within me, but I also felt an odd sense of calm wash over me. I was no longer the victim of my suspicions. I was taking control of the narrative. I decided to wait for the right moment, to allow her and the doctor to be in the spotlight, to expose their secrets in front of those who had witnessed our love. Each day, as I prepared for the inevitable confrontation, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. I longed for closure, for the truth to be laid bare before me, but the thought of confronting Susan also filled me with a sense of impending loss. I pictured our life together, the love we had shared, the moments we had cherished, and a part of me mourned what was slipping away. Yet, the reality was undeniable. I needed to confront this head-on. I had to be the one to reveal her deceit, to reclaim my narrative. I steeled myself for the task ahead, recognizing that no matter how much it hurt, I owed it to myself to know the truth, to face the reality of what had become of the love I thought was unbreakable. The clock was ticking, and I could feel the moment drawing near. As the days slipped by, I resolved to gather my strength, preparing for the confrontation that would change everything. I would expose the betrayal, not just for myself, but for the love I had once known. The day of the medical event dawned bright and clear, the sun pouring through the windows like liquid gold. It was an important day for Susan, a chance for her to shine, to showcase her expertise in front of colleagues, professionals, and community members. I had heard her talk about it for weeks, her excitement bubbling over as she prepared her presentation on the latest advancements in patient care. Yet, beneath my facade of support and encouragement lay a tumultuous sea of emotions. As I sipped my coffee, I could hear her in the bedroom, moving about in a flurry of nervous energy. I took a moment to gather my thoughts and steady my resolve. Today was the day I had been waiting for, the moment when everything would come to light. But for now, I needed to play my part, be the supportive husband, the cheerleader, and the partner she expected me to be. "Vic, can you help me with my presentation?" Susan called from the other room, her voice tinged with anxiety. "Sure, honey, just a second," I replied, my heart pounding in my chest. I made my way to the bedroom, where Susan stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her hair. She looked stunning, as always. The soft, flowing dress she wore accentuated her figure perfectly, and her makeup highlighted her features beautifully. But as I watched her, I noticed the slight tremor in her hands and the way her brow furrowed in concentration. "How are you feeling about the presentation?" I asked, forcing a smile as I approached her. "Oh, just the usual pre-presentation jitters," she replied, her eyes darting toward her notes. "I want everything to be perfect. It's such a big opportunity for me." "You're going to be amazing, Susan. You always are," I said, offering her a reassuring nod. Inside, however, I felt a swell of conflicting emotions. Pride in her accomplishments, mingled with the sickening knowledge of her betrayal. As she practiced her speech, I stood beside her, pretending to be engrossed in the details while my mind raced with thoughts of how I would reveal the truth. Her voice echoed in my ears, filled with passion and dedication. I found it hard to reconcile the woman I loved, the woman I believed in, with the reality of what she had done. Throughout the morning, I assisted her with her presentation, making small adjustments and offering feedback, all the while maintaining an air of calm. I could see how much this meant to her, how she thrived on the prospect of sharing her knowledge and making a difference. I felt a pang of guilt wash over me as I reminded myself of the impending confrontation. Would I shatter her dreams at the height of her success? As we prepared to leave, I made sure to dress sharply, putting on my best suit in an attempt to mirror her excitement. I wanted to project confidence, to mask the turmoil bubbling just beneath the surface. We arrived at the venue, a sleek conference center buzzing with energy. Colleagues and professionals milled about, exchanging greetings and catching up on the latest in the medical field. I walked beside her, taking in the vibrant atmosphere, yet feeling completely detached. My heart raced as I saw the doctor across the room, speaking animatedly with another attendee, his laughter ringing out like an alarm bell in my mind. The sight of him, the man who had shattered my trust, sent waves of anger and hurt crashing through me. I could only imagine what they had shared in secret, the stolen glances, the hushed conversations, the intimacy that had crept in between us like a thief in the night. Susan busily checked her materials, nervously rehearsing her opening lines as we made our way to the main hall. The large room was elegantly decorated, with a stage set up at the front and rows of chairs filled with eager attendees. As I looked around, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread build within me. I knew what was coming, it was only a matter of time. As she took her place on stage, I settled into my seat, the tension palpable in the air. I watched as she began her presentation, her confidence shining through as she spoke passionately about her work. The audience responded warmly, nodding and engaging with her words, but I could barely focus. My mind was consumed by the moment that lay ahead. With each passing minute, I felt a tempest of emotions swell within me: anger, sorrow, disappointment, but also a fierce resolve. I had played the role of the supportive husband long enough, and now it was time to expose the truth. The thought of her standing there, unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface, fueled my determination. As the presentation reached its climax, Susan's voice rose with excitement, and I could see her passion ignite the room. The audience hung on her every word, but I was already plotting my next move. I glanced at the doctor, who was sitting just a few rows back, his attention fixed on Susan. I could feel my heart racing as I anticipated the moment that would expose their secret. As she concluded her speech to a round of applause, I felt the air shift in the room. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. The moment was drawing near, and I was ready to confront the reality of our shattered love. As Susan beamed at her audience, taking in their appreciation, I stepped forward, microphone in hand. The room quieted, anticipation thickening the air. My heart raced, but I stood firm, ready to unleash the truth that had been simmering beneath the surface. It was time for the world to see what I had discovered, and for Susan and the doctor to face the consequences of their actions. The stage was set, the audience eager for what came next, and I felt the weight of the moment settle upon my shoulders. No more pretending, no more silence. Today, everything would change. The air in the room crackled with anticipation as the audience settled into their seats, the spotlight shining brightly on the stage where Susan had just delivered an inspiring presentation. I could hear the faint murmurs of admiration, the clapping that echoed in waves. But I remained transfixed, my heart racing as I watched her radiant smile, completely unaware of the storm that was brewing just beyond her reach. As I stood in the shadows, gripping the microphone tightly, I felt the weight of the moment bear down on me. My palms were slick with sweat, and a tumult of emotions surged within me: anger, pain, and an overwhelming need for closure. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This was it, the moment I had waited for, the moment when the truth would rise to the surface like a lifeboat in a stormy sea. With each passing second, the tension in the room grew thicker, and the atmosphere charged with unspoken words. I could see the doctor sitting among the audience, his smug expression as he basked in Susan's glory only stoked the fires of my resolve. I knew that once I stepped onto that stage, there would be no turning back. The facade of normalcy would shatter, and the truth would come crashing down like a wave against a rocky shore. Suddenly, I found my legs moving toward the stage, and as I approached, the murmurs died down, the applause fading into a hushed silence. Every eye in the room turned toward me, a mixture of curiosity and concern flickering across their faces. I felt as though I was walking through a dream, the spotlight blinding but illuminating the path I had chosen. This was my moment of reckoning. "Excuse me, everyone," I said, my voice trembling slightly as I spoke into the microphone. "I know this isn't my event, but I need to say something important." The audience stirred, a collective murmur of confusion sweeping through the room. I could see Susan's eyes widen, surprise etched across her face. I could feel the air thicken as her smile faltered, replaced by a dawning realization that something was wrong. The moment stretched out like a taut wire, and I pressed on, my heart pounding in my chest. "For those of you who don't know me, I'm Victor, Susan's husband. And I have come here today to confront a truth that has been eating away at me for far too long." I paused, allowing the weight of my words to sink in. The room was silent, every gaze fixed on me, waiting with bated breath. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I continued. I've been watching Susan, and I've noticed some unsettling patterns, her late nights, her secretive phone calls. I tried to brush it off, but deep down, I knew something was amiss. With each word I spoke, I could see Susan's expression shift from surprise to concern, and then to something resembling fear. The doctor shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and I could sense the unease ripple through the audience like a wave. It's been hard for me to come to terms with this, I said, my voice steadying as I felt the truth crystallizing within me. But I've discovered that Susan has been involved in a relationship, an affair, with our family doctor. The gasp that erupted from the audience was deafening, a collective intake of breath that resonated throughout the room. Whispers filled the air, each syllable heavy with disbelief and shock. I took a moment to absorb the weight of my revelation, the knowledge that the truth had finally been laid bare. The impact of my words rippled through the crowd, and I watched as faces turned pale and eyes widened in disbelief. Gasps of shock echoed from every corner of the room. I could see the doctor shift uncomfortably, his facade cracking, as he realized the weight of my accusation. The murmurs began, a chorus of whispers that spread like wildfire. Did you hear that? No way. Is it true? Not only has he treated our family, but he has also cared for Susan, especially closely, I continued, emphasizing the last phrase, my voice rising above the mounting noise. I could feel the tension coiling in the room, the energy shifting as the truth unfolded like a dark cloud descending upon us. The shock on Susan's face was a mix of horror and anger, her eyes darting between me and the doctor. I could see the fight in her, she was processing my words, the reality crashing down around her like shattered glass. But there was no escape, no way to backtrack from this moment. Everyone here today knows how much we valued our family doctor, how we trusted him with our lives, I said, my voice cutting through the growing chaos. Yet here I stand, revealing that trust was misplaced. The audience began to murmur again, their conversations mingling with disbelief and condemnation. I felt a strange sense of power, standing in the spotlight while the doctor and Susan were now the targets of scrutiny and whispers. Susan's expression shifted from shock to anger as she finally found her voice. "Victor, how could you?" she began, but I cut her off, my determination surging as I pressed on. "No, Susan, this isn't about me anymore, it's about you and him." I gestured toward the doctor, who now wore an expression of bewilderment and anxiety. The faces of the attendees turned toward him, eyes narrowing, judgment simmering just beneath the surface. "Your actions have consequences," I said, my voice steady but laced with bitterness. "And today, everyone here deserves to know the truth about the man they've trusted, the woman they've respected." The whispers grew louder, morphing into a cacophony of shock and outrage. I could see Susan's cheeks flush with embarrassment, her anger fading into something deeper, realization, guilt, perhaps even remorse. But the damage was done. The truth had erupted into the open, and there was no unringing that bell. The doctor, clearly shaken, tried to regain composure. "Victor, this isn't the time or place for this," he attempted, his voice shaky. But the damage was irrevocable, and his protests fell flat against the tide of revelation I had unleashed. As the audience's eyes bore down on them, I felt a strange satisfaction wash over me. I had stood tall in the face of betrayal, and now, they were the ones who had to reckon with the consequences of their actions. The weight of my pain was now shared, and I could almost hear the murmurs of disbelief echoing through the room. "Your betrayal has not only hurt me," I continued, my voice resolute, "but it has affected everyone here who believed in the sanctity of our family. You've shattered trust, and now you have to face it together." As I stood there, taking in the chaos I had set in motion, I felt a rush of liberation wash over me. I had confronted the truth, exposed the deception, and, in doing so, reclaimed my power. The tension in the room was palpable, the air thick with unspoken words, but I had no regrets. This was the culmination of my journey, a moment of catharsis, a chance to let go of the pain and betrayal. No longer would I be the man left in the shadows, silenced by hurt. I had risen to the occasion, and now, as the dust settled, I could finally begin to find my way forward. As the echoes of my revelation hung heavy in the air, the atmosphere in the room morphed from disbelief to an explosive mix of emotions. Gasps and whispers turned into an uncontrollable buzz, a tidal wave of murmurs swirling around like an unseen current. I stood at the center of the storm, watching the crowd react to the fallout of my words with an unsettling sense of detachment. Laughter erupted from one corner of the room, a sharp and discordant sound that contrasted starkly with the seriousness of the situation. It was a cruel laughter, an instinctive response to the discomfort of others. A few guests, perhaps unable to cope with the gravity of the betrayal, began to chuckle as if to dismiss the reality before them. I could see their eyes darting between Susan and the doctor, a perverse mix of shock and amusement. It was as though they were witnessing a spectacle, a performance unfolding before their eyes, and they were unwittingly drawn into the drama. "Did you see the look on her face?" one woman whispered to her companion, who nodded, her mouth agape in disbelief. The crowd seemed to divide into factions. Some were entertained, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, grappling with the implications of what I had just exposed. A man in a sharp suit rose from his seat, shaking his head in disbelief as he walked toward the exit. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, casting a final glance back at us before stepping out of the hall. His departure was a striking reminder of how swiftly opinions could change, and how quickly loyalty could vanish in the face of scandal. The sound of the door closing resonated like a final note in a symphony, signaling the exit of one who could no longer bear witness to the unfolding chaos. Meanwhile, Susan stood frozen, her expression a blend of shock and fury, as the whispers intensified around her. Some guests approached her cautiously, their faces etched with concern. "Susan, are you okay?" one woman asked, her voice laced with a mixture of sympathy and shock. But the words seemed hollow in the context of the betrayal, a mere balm for the gaping wound that had been exposed. The doctor, meanwhile, fumbled with his tie, his usual confidence evaporating like mist in the morning sun. He attempted to regain control of the situation, stepping forward to address the audience. "This is all a misunderstanding," he began, but his voice faltered, drowned out by the escalating chatter in the room. People were too engrossed in the unfolding drama, too eager to feed on the spectacle of it all. "I can't believe this is happening," someone exclaimed, shaking their head. "How could they do this?" The incredulity swept through the crowd like a wave, and I watched as eyes turned from me to Susan and the doctor, dissecting their reactions with a mix of fascination and condemnation. The cacophony of voices grew louder, a symphony of judgment echoing through the hall. It was a moment of reckoning, and I reveled in the chaos I had unleashed. The tension in the room was electric, the air thick with the remnants of betrayal, anger, and disbelief. I watched as friendships hung in the balance, and allegiances shifted like sand beneath the tide. As the scene unfolded, I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching a movie of my life play out before me. The world I once knew, the one built on trust and love, was disintegrating before my eyes. I had uncovered a truth that would reshape not only my life but the lives of everyone in that room. But amidst the tumult, I also felt a strange sense of satisfaction. This was my moment, my victory, and as the whispers grew into a storm, I stood firm, resolute. I had confronted the demons that haunted my marriage and had pulled the curtain back on the facade that had imprisoned me for too long. As the event began to spiral into full-blown drama, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had come here seeking the truth, and in doing so, I had reclaimed my power. I looked around at the chaos I had ignited, and while part of me felt a twinge of sadness for Susan, the overwhelming sense of liberation pushed those feelings aside. The hall buzzed with conversations, some incredulous, some accusatory, but all fueled by the revelation that had shaken our lives. I could see Susan struggling to regain her composure, surrounded by a mixture of concerned friends and bewildered acquaintances. The doctor, meanwhile, seemed to shrink under the weight of the scrutiny, his confidence shattered like glass. With each moment that passed, I felt the shackles of my pain loosening. The weight of betrayal that had anchored me for so long was finally lifting, and I could see a path forward. I had exposed the lies, and now I was free to forge my destiny. The laughter and whispers would fade, and what would remain was the truth, raw and unfiltered. As I made my way toward the exit, I felt a sense of closure beginning to wash over me. I glanced back one last time at the scene unfolding behind me, my wife, the doctor, the audience, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. I had confronted the betrayal head-on, and now I was ready to leave it all behind. I stepped outside into the cool evening air, the weight of the world falling away with every step I took. My heart raced, not from anger or hurt, but from the thrill of possibility. I could finally start anew, free from the shadows of deceit and betrayal. As I walked away from the chaos, I knew that my journey was far from over, but the first chapter of my new life had begun. I felt lighter, unburdened, and ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The pain of the past had taught me valuable lessons, and as I stepped into the future, I vowed to seek truth, authenticity, and a life unfettered by lies. And in that moment of clarity, I realized that while I had sought revenge, what I truly found was liberation. I paused at the entrance, the sounds of the event swirling behind me, and took a deep breath. This was a pivotal moment, one that would define my future and shape my identity moving forward. I had spent too long allowing the betrayal to dictate my emotions and decisions. Now, standing at the threshold of a new beginning, I understood that I had the power to rewrite my narrative. The freedom that lay ahead felt intoxicating, each possibility a new chapter waiting to unfold. I could focus on healing, rediscovering the man I was before the betrayal shattered my trust. As I stepped into the cool night air, I felt a sense of gratitude wash over me, not for the betrayal itself, but for the clarity it had brought. The pain had forced me to confront the truth, and in doing so, I had unearthed a strength I didn't know I possessed. I could finally pursue what truly mattered, my happiness, my peace of mind, and the relationships that were built on honesty and respect. No longer would I allow the shadows of deceit to linger in my life. I was ready to embrace the journey ahead, to create a future filled with integrity, laughter, and genuine connections, untainted by the ghosts of the past.